thank you for being with us. I'm going to get to the new video in just one moment, but Ms. Quackenbush, when is the last time you spoke with your daughter?
Friday night, April 12th.
And what was your conversation?
It was a good conversation. She said she was camping. I wondered why. She was there. I guess there was an eclipse. Then
Right.
we talked. I prayed with her. She struggled since the loss of her brothers and her father and grandfather. But she was sounding okay. It was just a regular conversation.
She was camping to look at the eclipse?
That was my understanding.
Okay. And she seemed in good spirits?
She was.
Okay. When you state that you prayed with her, that's because she had suffered loss, as had you. What had happened?
In 2015, I lost my oldest son to suicide. Not 10 months later, I lost my youngest son, who was serving as a Marine. 2020, Danielle lost her grandfather that she was living with to COVID, and a month later, her father to COVID as well.
Your family has been through so much, and now this. Miss Quackenbush, how, as a crime victim myself, I'm always curious, how do you get to sleep at night? How do you take your mind off Danielle missing, even for 5 minutes?
It's not easy. I have strong faith that this will be made right, but it's not easy.
Miss Quackenbush spoke to her daughter that day. Everything was fine. Listen.
Danielle Lopez is in frequent contact with her mom and calls her from the Brendan T. Burns State Forest Campground Friday night. Sue tells her daughter it sounds like fun. Danielle hasn't been camping since she was a little girl. Danielle tells Sue to stop worrying when Sue questions if it's warm enough to be camping. Danielle ends their conversation with a usual, "I love you and we'll talk soon."
Joining me is Danielle's mom, Sue Quackenbush. Miss Quackenbush, you stated that everything seemed fine. You guys typically pray together over the phone. That was not unusual. So she goes out camping to see the eclipse, and you were actually worried that she might get cold?
Yes.
Well, describe that part of the conversation.
I just said it's April. It's cold at night. She assured me she had a heater, a campfire, and that she was okay. She struggled a lot after the losses. Danielle struggled a lot. So I worried.
What do you mean by struggled?
After the loss of her father, she had resources, and so she wasn't working. That didn't change anything. I'm a mom, having lost 2 children. I was very much in touch with her, calling her twice a day. We didn't always speak twice a day, but I called her twice a day.
So you guys were in very, very close contact. Has there ever been a time when it's been over a month that you don't speak to her?
Never.
Okay, back to the moment that Danielle seemingly just vanished off a very, very popular hiking trail. Listen.
At 9:11 a.m. Saturday morning, Danielle is spotted on surveillance footage buying coffee from a Wawa in Vincenttown, about a 10-minute drive from the campsite. Danielle does not appear to be in distress. Danielle uses a Wawa rewards card she shares with her mother, regarded by both as emergency money, to make her purchases that morning.
Okay, there is Danielle, and this is 9:11 a.m. on a Saturday morning, spotted in a Wawa in Vincenttown. That's only a few minutes away from the campsite where she was. Now, she's obviously not in any distress at all, and she uses the Wawa Rewards card she shared with her mom. Now, Ms. Quackenbush, why did you regard that as, quote, emergency money? What does that mean?
Danielle had resources, but as a mom, if she ever needed gas, if she ever needed anything, we've had it since she was probably 18 that we've shared it. But there were times where she'd grab a coffee and a Wawa sandwich and use it, but not very often. So when I saw this, I wondered, but at least I knew where she was.
When did you realize, Ms. Quackenbush, something was wrong?
I talked with her on Friday night, and by Monday, when I couldn't reach her, I was growing increasingly concerned every day.
So you believe something happened between the Saturday morning at 9/11 when we see her at Wawa's, and by Monday morning, something was horribly wrong.
That's when I started becoming alarmed, and then there were fires in the forest. I woke up that morning to news on the news that there were fires in the forest, and that's when I called the missing persons.
Straight out to Dr. John Delatorre joining us, licensed psychologist, and you can find him online at resolutionfcs.com. Dr. Delatorre, thank you for being with us. That is what we call routine evidence, habit evidence, evidence of routine. They talk to each other about twice a day. They were texting back and forth all the time. We have seen timelines start based on something as seemingly innocuous as a dog barking, and that's the O.J. Simpson case when Nicole Brown's dog Akita began to moan and wail, and the neighbors heard it, and they had never heard anything like that before. Here, I would place the timeline starting at about 9:12 after she walked out of that Wawa on a Saturday morning, probably to Sunday night, because by Monday morning, her mother realized something was wrong.
Yeah, not only that, is that by Monday morning, you would think then that she would have responded back to her mother, right? So it's in that time frame that the behaviors of someone really kind of define what exactly it is that's going on. If they're still around and still able to communicate, you would think that they would engage in a behavior that would suggest that everything is fine. If they're not able to do that, then perhaps something else got in the way of them being able to communicate. Lost the phone, or the power goes out on the phone. Something happens in that time frame where she's not able to say, hey, to other people, right? Whether it's friends or whoever it is that's in her life, that she's not able to tell them everything's going okay, right? I'm just out here doing for myself.
Now with us, Brian Fitzgibbons, Director of Operations, USPA Nationwide Security. He leads a team of expert investigators specializing in locating missing people. Brian, the fact that she suddenly stopped, I know it's called routine evidence, evidence of habit, but I would start the timeline right there because that was a huge departure from her normal dyed-in-the-wool routine of talking to mom, praying with mom on the phone, texting back and forth. That starts it for me. That Saturday when she steps out of that Wawa.
Certainly, and I'm a student of renowned cold case detective J. Warner Wallace, who talks about these investigations in three phases: the fuse, the explosion, and the fallout. Okay, so when we're talking about what's leading up to her disappearance, we start that timeline where the departure from her routine behavior begins. A lack of a response back to a text, lack of communication. We know that her car broke down. These are all things that are that fuse of what happened that describe to us the lead up to this event.
Ms. Quackenbush, I think actually now that I'm analyzing it, the timeline starts later based on the new video evidence you've seen of the GoPro. But let me ask you this, Sue, did you call and report her missing?
Yes, I did.
When was that and what happened when you called to report her missing?
I believe it was the 23rd that I called. Again, I woke up that morning seeing that there were forest fires, significant forest fires in the Penn State Forest area. And without having been able to reach her, I saw her calls, the texts weren't going through, the calls weren't going through. And I gave it some time and called. Wednesday the 24th is when I called to report her missing.
Immediately, the search is on. Listen.
Believing Danielle is still in the area, state police launched massive searches for Danielle throughout the state park. Detectives are also searching for her blue two-door 2008 Hyundai Accent that hasn't been seen since Danielle disappeared. The searches get wider and wider until Danielle's car is found abandoned a week later, roughly 15 miles from the campsite. The car is parked in the center of a large puddle on Lost Lane Road, a dirt path deep in the Penn State Forest.
Okay, Sydney Sumner joining me, crimeonline.com investigative reporter. Explain to me about the car being found. What can you tell me about that? Now, this is after Wawa's.
Yes, ma'am. So a week into the search for Danielle, her car is found about 15 miles from the campsite where she was staying. The car was parked on a dirt road deep in the Penn State Forest. This is a heavily wooded area. It's very rural, but it seems to be a fairly popular trail. And her car is parked in this giant mud puddle, and it's just sitting there. The battery is dead.
Now, isn't it true when they jumped it, the emergency blinkers immediately started flashing, and we believe that the flashing blinkers is what ran out the battery?
That's correct, Nancy. That's exactly what police believe happened.
Okay, let's see a map of what we're talking about. Tell me again, Sydney, where is the car as it relates to the campsite and as it relates to Wawa's?
So the campsite is kind of directly in between both of these points we see on the map. So she goes to this Wawa's in one direction. Where her car is found is 15 miles from the campsite in the other direction. So her car is found disabled on this Lost Lane Road that goes straight through the Penn Forest. It's a popular trail, but it's rural, it's a dirt path, it's a heavily wooded area.